Cool. We are live. And let's give people a minute or two to join. Cool. So for everyone watching, happy Friday. It is a little Catalyst convo that we're having. Generally, we're going to do some Catalyst updates and chat to some of the researchers that have put their work up on Catalyst. And then, yeah, also some of the DAO leads who've been working with us very closely to get Catalyst up and running. It's been a crazy 2 weeks in the land of DeSci. I think it has been years of work sort of culminating into this moment. But obviously there's been a huge influx. A whole bunch of projects on Catalyst got funded, which was amazing. I think it was sort of over, I think we're kind of sitting at about $2 million worth of research has been funded on Catalyst in the past 2 weeks, which is really, really mind-blowing. And as having watched how to build it and work so hard on it, it's really rewarding to see, money going into scientists' hands. And also like creating this more sort of like stadium science where people are invited to, witness and participate in research. And that's really, I think, the key goal of DeSci. But we have a stacked lineup, so I'm going to try and be quick about this, but I'm just going to, for those of you who are new to Catalyst and what it is, I will give you a little intro and a history. Basically, Molecule started building Catalyst. It was actually one of our very first projects, way back when our two co-founders started Molecule. They built this product called Catalyst to crowdfund for science. They launched a project. It failed dismally. I think they were trying to raise, they raised maybe 10% of what they were trying to raise, and kind of filed it, put it back in the idea box, and then did a whole bunch of other stuff. And then this year, we kind of re-pitched the idea of Catalyst and thought, okay, cool, let's try and make it work again. And essentially, Catalyst aims to be a decentralized science funding machine where it connects, the crypto community and people who have crypto who that want to get involved and support research, and it brings those researchers and those crypto people together, and it basically figures out how to align and connect the two groups. And the way it works is sort of a researcher can upload their project, and people can contribute funds. It's up to them how much they want to contribute. There's a set funding goal, and basically people put money in until the funding goal is reached. When it's reached, a negotiation period begins. So this is also something I wanted to remind people on, is that this is science happening with real universities and really amazing, real established researchers. And so it's not really as simple as minting a token and sending it out, which is why we have this negotiation period that allows for all of the legal back end and contract signing to happen. So yeah, everyone should just be aware that there is this negotiation period. And then funds are delivered to the researcher. They get to execute on their work, and in exchange, the crypto sort of community that has contributed and funded the science, they get intellectual property tokens. And intellectual property tokens are governance tokens that allow them to help guide and shape the research as the research goes on. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. We've got a lot of great docs and stuff, and you can always message me and chat to me if you'd like to know more about how we built it and why we built it. But I think maybe what I would like to start with today is a little bit of good vibes of basically, Mark, I think your project got funded this week, and I'd love to know how that felt watching that funding bar fill up in about an hour, and what you intend to do now.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was really cool. We had a lot of pressure going up to the day of the launch, so I was a bit distracted. Actually, we were in a product meeting, and then I realized it was live and almost already funded. So that usually doesn't happen when I'm trying to get money for projects. It's usually a long, drawn-out time, and then there's a long review process, and it feels like here you could put the time into organizing, and then the community just clicked and made it happen. So it was really amazing. And now that I was actually really surprised. We were on a core team meeting the other day, and I said, oh, wow, everything actually worked kind of perfectly. We have the money to now contract the organization we're working with to run the study. We are going to kick off the full study design quite soon. I have the money for the product. So amazingly, usually doesn't happen in science projects, but it seems like everything is moving in a very smooth and orderly fashion. So very efficient, I guess, like the crypto mythos. So we're looking forward to executing in 2025.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, I think like I've there was one study that was kind of I read once that was like it takes on average like 73 days of an application for grant funding for research compared to I think an hour. It's quite a stark difference. But yeah,
well,
I mean,
and also like sometimes you do the grant and it gets rejected, and then you change it, give feedback. So it's really not uncommon if you want to raise like 500K, 3 to 500K. It might take 6 to 8 or 12 months really from start to finish, preparing everything. So this was definitely quite a difference, and telling a lot of colleagues about it.
amazing. Okay, Aubrey, I'd love to hear from you. Could you please introduce yourself for everyone who's watching? And then
Yeah, sure.
sort of you are intending to go on and raise money on Catalyst. So you kind of are before where Mark is. But why are you open to trying out this way of funding?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me introduce myself. Actually, what I'd really like to do, I see Alex Milowski is on the call. I would like to ask him to say some of that, because he's really the person who's been spearheading the work with you guys. So yes, my name's Dr. Aubrey de Grey. I am the President and Chief Science Officer of a public charity, a nonprofit based in California called LEV Foundation. And we are focused, of course, on trying to bring aging under medical control. But we are doing early stage research. So our work is all in mice, not in people. And specifically, we are interested in the potential to get combinations of interventions to have a greater effect than any individual treatment that we might apply. So the field has reached the point over the past few years where there are quite a few approaches to combating aging in mice that have shown some degree of success in terms of extending healthy life and extending total life. And the ways in which some of those things are working are essentially the paradigm that I've been pursuing and pioneered more than 20 years ago, which is not so much to slow aging down, but actually to reverse it. So we take mice that are already in middle age and we essentially rejuvenate them. Anyway, so yes, the first experiment of this nature that anyone had ever done was started by us early last year, and it's nearly complete, and it's worked reasonably well, but not nearly as well as it needs to in order to really, blow the socks off the world with regard to the ability to bring aging under control. So we are extremely eager to do follow-up work of the same kind, combining at least 4, maybe as many as 8 different interventions in the same mice at the same time, and seeing what happens. And this has very much caught the imagination of the research community and the wider community in the longevity world. So we're very excited about that. But these experiments are quite expensive. So we are very keen to, we haven't yet got the funds to do this. Plan is to start with some pilot studies, some studies that will put the will give us the information so as to optimize the main study, and those studies will cost a couple of $100K for the first phase of them, and another couple of $100 for the next phase. The final study is going to cost $1 million, and of course we are raising money elsewhere as well to the best of our ability. But I will let Alex chime in and talk about how the involvement of Beta DAO and Catalyst came about and where it's going.
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks, Aubrey. Thanks for being here. Yeah, so this is something that we're actually been contemplating for a while. I think since I think September, where DAO hosted an event in Singapore. Aubrey was there speaking. So we've been having this conversation for a while. I think now is like the best time to be leveraging Catalyst to do this. Of course, there's a lot of excitement around DeSci. And as Aubrey was saying, there's this is not a cheap project. There's a lot involved in this. So we do want to leverage this time, and BitDAO is essentially going to be sponsoring a part of that project when it launches in Catalyst. So if you are a part of the BitDAO community, there's actually a proposal live now in support for this project. So go there and vote. We are, of course, very excited about this. We truly support what Aubrey is doing. We do think it can have a substantial impact in the entire longevity field. So yeah, the community is quite excited about this, I think, and I think Catalyst is going to be a very good partner to launch this.
Amazing, thank you. So Aubrey, do you have any idea? I mean, how would you like to utilize the community component of intellectual property tokens that are obviously coming out of Catalyst?
Well, I think really, a huge amount of what I do is community building. I probably do more of that than I do overseeing science over the past 20 years or more that I've been a reasonably high-profile member of this field. And so, that's very much part of it. I want people who are interested in pioneering technology generally and in, making a difference to the world, improving the human condition, so to speak. I want everyone to understand what's possible now in terms of accelerating the arrival of solutions to the world's biggest problem. So in terms of the specifics of how Catalyst works, I mean, of course, I'm relatively new to this. I definitely, I'm a scientist. I don't really know much about funding about novel funding mechanisms such as this, and I am enjoying learning about that. I do want to emphasize, of course, that the work that we do is not predominantly focused on generating new intellectual property for ourselves or for our supporters. We're a nonprofit. As such, the income that we get accrues, of course, tax benefits, both in the US and actually throughout Europe through mechanisms that are already in place. But it doesn't really accrue, share equity or anything like that, and so on. However, it's very important to recognize that the more progress we make, the greater will be the value of any investments that anyone makes anywhere else in the longevity industry. Because, of course, the size of the industry and the rate at which that industry grows depends on how the public and the whole ecosystem views its prospects. So in an indirect sense, this is very much an investment.
Amazing, thank you. Well, I just want to say from our end and from everyone involved, I'm very grateful that you are so open-minded to coming in and trying platforms like Catalyst. I think I want to make sure everyone gets a chance to talk. So I think I'm going to jump over to Laura and Peter. Laura and Peter had an amazingly successful week as well. Their project also got funded on Catalyst. I would love, Laura, do you maybe want to start and introduce yourself and Peter? And then, yeah, maybe Peter, we've actually never met properly. I've spoken to Laura many, many times, but I'd also love to know what your experience was with, coming onto Catalyst, watching that funding fill up, why you were open to Catalyst and all that. So yeah, Laura, if you want to go start.
Thank you, Ella. I'm very thrilled to be here with the DeSci family. And also it's amazing that longevity researchers and really big names in longevity like Aubrey and Peter are here with us. Maybe not a lot of people realize how how pioneering Aubrey in building community has been in the last 20 years. And I know Aubrey and Peter have had a lot of amazing debates about theories of aging. And we are particularly excited that Peter's doing, and Gero AI is doing this with Athena DAO. Peter and I were at a JPM in January. This has been a long time in the making. He came, we just had a quick discussion in a longevity conference, and we got going with it. People have to realize that the funding happens fast, but there's a lot of work that goes into this, negotiations, going about the science, the milestones, how we're going to do this. And I put it on a post on Twitter this week after the funding. Thank you so much for all our funders, and thank you to Catalyst for powering this, making so many funding dollars going into science. The closer we get to menopause being an option, it's amazing, and every dollar counts. Ovarian aging is massively underfunded, so the fact that we get to try this with Peter and Gero AI, it's incredible. So I'm going to let him introduce himself and give him some, a chance to talk, so that everybody else here in the call can also talk about their projects.
Thank you very much. My name is Peter Fedichev. I'm from Gero AI, and I'm happy to see quite some of my friends here already. I've been listening to everybody's others little presentations here, and I'm really thinking that longevity community is very open-minded and very advanced in many ways. I think it's up to the scale of the problem that we're trying to solve, and it's very exciting to see crypto community in general and decentralized science community in particular spearheading these efforts. These people are with different demographics. This is, I think, the youngest demographics everywhere with lots of resources, which is unique. These people are with kind of engineering mindset. Many of them, lots of them are not afraid of math, which is empowering in many ways. And I do believe that as crypto democratized finance to many people, I believe that in the same way, eventually decentralized science, which will democratize venture funding and grant funding, because as we know, the sources of money are not very egalitarian, let's put it like this, and localized in a very few geographical locations. So I think there is a huge potential in what you are doing. I'm delighted to be a part of it, and many thanks to Laura and to everyone else, because we wouldn't be doing it without help. And now I feel like responsibility and also, awe in what I see, and like these new methods of supporting science in the making. I'm happy to be part of this.
That's makes me so happy. Yeah, I love the bit of it that you said about sort of this responsibility, because I think the reason I sort of got attracted to DeSci in the first place is like I studied science, that's my background, and it always really amazed me, because I found that like scientists, they go into the lab every day, and their job is to ultimately help humanity, and it's to like help this general population or maybe certain populations, but it's always so far removed from those people. And what really appealed about DeSci to me was this sort of shrinking of that gap, and like connecting researchers to the people who, really passionately care about their work. So I'm glad that you now have this connection with your community that has all decided to, support your work. Okay. Round the room again. Albert, you had 2 projects. So Albert's a core lead from Valley DAO. He had 2 projects also get funded on Catalyst this past 2 weeks, I think. Yeah, we'd love to hear a little bit about those and about what your next steps are now that you've gotten this funding.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting us. I couldn't get the scientist on the call. One of them is at a conference. The other one is in Australia, so a little bit of tricky timing. And briefly about Valley DAO. So we are the one DAO that is focusing on non-human health, but actually climate applications. So using biology to solve different climate technology problems. And we always ask ourselves, like, how can we create the biggest impact with the research that we fund, of course. And so we looked at the the primary polluting industries, and found that around 5% of global emissions stem from the textile industry. Given that everybody needs clothes, right? But the process of creating textiles is very energy intensive. We have to ship it. We produce it, half across the globe, and so on. And there's a lot of consumption, and the quality of the clothing are generally quite bad these days. And so we looked at, like the primary way of creating clothing is like you need some sort of fiber, some sort of material that you're going to spin together into a garment. And so we looked at, a wide range of different ways to produce these fibers. Of course, traditionally, like we use cotton, we grow cotton, we harvest that, we process it. The issue with cotton is that it's extremely water consuming. And it requires a lot of pesticides, and it's also relatively slow to grow. We looked at other types of materials like wool, linen, and of course, the majority of clothes today are also just produced from oil, right? So polyester, for example. So we pump out oil from the ground and we refine it and we put it on ourselves. And I'm of the opinion like it shouldn't have to be that way. So the focus of this project, it's with the Austrian Center of Industrial Biotechnology with Professor Georg Gorbitz. He's worked for the last 30 years on a range of different textile materials, and has found that hemp, the hemp plant and the fiber that it produces are one of the most, like if you look at the energy consumption and the pesticide use scale, it's the one that it's at a perfect optimum. It requires 3 times less water to grow. It grows 3 times faster, and it also literally purifies the soil underneath it. Like it captures it phytoremediates it. It's what they call it. And so with this project, what we're doing is we're taking hemp fibers, and we're modifying them with a set of enzymes that have been developed at Georg's lab. And the reason why we're doing that is like hemp, it's it has all of these benefits, but it's not super soft to the touch. It's not really flexible, but it has other really interesting properties. It's very UV protectant. It's very durable, and so on. And so with these enzymes, we're looking to make the fabric softer and make it essentially desirable for the textile industry. And the time to a product with this one, we're looking at something like 5 to potentially 10 months. And I think the opportunity that presents us with like IP tokens and like the community is like we could potentially ship a product to the different holders, for example, and you just make science real for all of these new people that come into DeSci. Just giving something for them to touch and interact with that came out from this industry. So that's the first project. The second project is focusing on biomining. So this project is with an Australian national labs with Dr. Anna Kaksonen. She's worked for the last 20 years with essentially just figuring out how can we use microbes to extract metals from different ores and from electronic waste. So what they've done is they developed a process for basically taking electronic waste, shredding it down mechanically, and they were out on essentially like mining fields, taking different water samples. And what they found were a range of different microbial communities. So exactly like your microbiome, for example, it consists of different strains of bacteria. Same principle here, but these bacteria were trained in extracting metals, and particularly rare earth metals. And maybe some of you today know, like today, China controls 90% of the supply of these metals. And so we need to find ways of becoming independent from this, given the geopolitical situation. And what do these metals power? They power all databases, electrical wiring, and graphic cards, batteries, and so on. And so what we're doing in this project is basically using these microbes to extract rare earth metals from electronic waste, instead of doing it the traditional way where you would heat up a process to around 1,000 degrees and also emit a bunch of cancerogenic compounds into the air. With these microbes, we can do it at room temperature. So yeah, slightly higher than room temperature, around 50 degrees, which is still relatively low for the process. And we, can capture the benefits of having a more sustainable process, but also at the same time reusing all of the electronics that are just lying around there, just being trash, essentially.
Cool, thank you. So, I mean, I've just got a message saying we've got 800 people watching. So, first of all, thank you to everyone who's joining. As a brief recap, Catalyst is the DeSci funding machine. On this call, we've heard from Peter and Mark, who both respectively, and Albert, who have all had their projects funded this week via Catalyst. So if you participated in those sales, follow the Catalyst page, get in the Telegram chat. We're going to be sending updates there for what the next steps are. And then we have Aubrey, who's going to be raising some money on Catalyst pretty soon. I think I'd expect in the next week. So if you'd like to be involved in that, make sure you stay up to date. And then we also have lastly, Brian, I know I need to give you a second to speak. I'm sorry, we've just got so many people on this call. But I'm going to jump over to Jesse because Jesse is from SciDAO. And they are also fundraising next week for a project. What I also love is about my job is that in this call we have basically a deeply well-established longevity researcher. We've got machine learning training models that are going to help women's health. We've got biomining. We've got brain supplements, and now we're going to go into sort of psychedelic research. And I think it's really great that there's this complete array of chocolate box of science that's really I think it gives people a lot of options for what they are personally interested in. But yeah, Jesse, take it away. Tell them about your project.
Sure. It's kind of like an advent calendar of science.
Yeah,
Every
exactly.
day you get a new project that you can fund. Yeah, it's great. The first project ever fundraised on Molecule Catalyst in 5-6 years ago when the product was first launched was a psychedelic research project. It was at the University of Toronto with the scientist named Rotem Petrankar, looking at the effects of microdosing psilocybin. And that project actually failed to reach its funding goal. Funds were returned to the funders. And the founders of Molecule decided, you know what? This was too early. There's no market appetite for funding science using crypto. Let's go back to the drawing board and figure out what to do. And so what they did was they launched VitaDAO, in part to build demand, to whet the appetite of the market for funding these, for funding science using crypto. And that's what brought us back here today, to now Catalyst being a success, to being a platform that people are actually using to fund science on chain. The market's appetite is now wet, right? People are interested in doing this. And we've come back around to now a new psychedelic research project on Catalyst, which I'm very excited about because it comes from people who have the same profession as me, which is lawyers, which could be bad or good depending upon your perspective.
People.
Yeah, our favorite people, yeah. Well, the thing about lawyers that's great is that lawyers know, especially the lawyers that are part of this project, know IP really well. And what we're buying in Catalyst are IP tokens. And so, as a buyer, you want to look very carefully at, well, what's the IP for this underlying research project that I'm funding? And the cool thing about this project on Catalyst now, the Next Gen and Pathogens project that SciDAO is the intended sponsor for, is that it is from people who are lawyers. They're not only lawyers, they're also medicinal chemists and very talented at that. But they know the IP landscape really well, and they know where the holes are in that IP landscape and know how to fill those holes with patent applications that protect really interesting new chemical entities, specifically in this field of empathogens. For those of you who don't know what empathogens are, they kind of do what it says on the tin. They make you feel more. And MDMA being kind of like the most famous empathogen. So the question is, well, are there others? Are there other variants of MDMA that could be safer or more interesting, more short acting, less side effects. And these chemists and IP attorneys think so, yeah, there are. And what they want to do is find out, are they safe? You know, do toxicity and safety studies. And then ultimately, if they prove safe, see how they make people feel.
Very cool. We've had, yeah, I was going to say, I think there's been a lot of community interest for this project, because I think obviously psychedelics research is deeply overlooked when it comes to traditional funding.
Yeah, I think that's right. And oh, sorry, go ahead.
I thought you were finished. I was just asking if I can ask Jesse a question on the project.
Of course. It's an open conversation. Anyone can jump in at any point. And also, people, there are questions that you can send in. We can see them on the chat. So if you do want to ask any of these researchers or DAO leads, you've got them here, and I'll ask them. So, but yeah, jump in.
My question was, and sorry if you said this already, I might have missed it, but how are these, so it was a range of compounds that with potential empathogenic effects, right? And how are they sourced or discovered? Like, are they like naturally occurring or synthesized? Like, what's the source?
Synthesized. Yeah. But you'd have to ask the researchers, and I'm sorry, like I'm just a lawyer, right? And I'm not the chemist lawyer, and so like I really don't know, and I feel actually like a bit of imposter syndrome speaking on their behalf. But I will kind of speak to Ella's point that like part of this, the great product market fit of crypto and science is funding underfunded research areas, these areas that are overlooked, right? Like psychedelics, like women's health, like longevity, like synthetic biology. These places that don't get government funding for one reason or another, don't get a lot of R&D funding. And so bypassing that middleman of the NIH or the traditional funding institutions is a necessity in order to get funding to this science.
Super cool. Do we see any crossovers, collabs between Perceptor and Empathogens? So both working to make the brain better.
Certainly with longevity, I can tell you that.
I just think it would be amazing. I don't know if people realize how Aubrey and Peter are like really, really, really big in the longevity world. Peter's calling in from Singapore. Aubrey from California, and it'll be really cool if we can hear we can hear about their research. Simply because it really shows that DeSci is able to attract really big names into this space. And that's an amazing thing for all of us, simply that reputable names that are like collaborating with pharma, have launched foundations, are well respected by peers in the scientific world, longevity biotech world, and in other areas of science are here with us. I mean, I know Aubrey talked about the experiment, and I love to, for Peter maybe to also talk about what he's been doing with Gero, because I remember being at DeSci New York last year in August, and Dr. Steve Horvath calling Peter one of the best mathematical minds in the world right now. So it'll be cool to hear from him too.
Yeah, Peter, take the floor.
Well, I normally tell this story like 15 years ago. I had a decent job. I was doing theoretical physics in a good university, and then somebody exposed me to examples of mammals that do not age, and then I met Aubrey and a few other guys. Most of them are interfacing with the decentralized community right now, so I got in a good gang of people who really decided to devote most of their time to find a medical solution to aging problem. And my first publication on aging was in 2015. Since then, I learned quite a lot. So it turned out to be a little bit more difficult problem, of course, than it looked. But really, Gero AI is a company that is working on solving aging. We're using lots of medical data from humans. We're studying aging in humans. Humans are the best studied animals on Earth right now since a few years. 500 million people have their medical records in digitalized form. More than 10 million people are genotyped. There is lots of data. And you can actually bring people now with mathematical, physics, and engineering background to the data to get people who are predicting markets to start predicting their health, right? They don't need money in the grave. So if they can use half of their abilities to process data, to understand human aging and diseases, I think we would be living in a much better world. So that's why I like this community, this intersection of geeks from all sorts of life, I would say from all streets. Studying whatever, psychedelics, longevity, really, I mean, look, if you want to understand if your mice is going to live longer, you try what is called an open field test. Open field test is when you put this animal into a new cage and see if it discovers something new there or not. So as you know, young people go into a new room and start running around, elder people stay and talk. So that's aging, right? Well before your joints start hurting and things like that. So we know that drugs that affect aging actually help mice in open field tests. So that's why I feel somewhat excited what people do in all these other projects related to psychedelics, for example. So I think crypto community is open. There are no rules. And there are no those rigid rules. There are new forms like community building, community interacting. That's a great way of doing things that are useful to people. And that's why we're here.
Thank you so much, Peter. Yeah, it really, it feels like we're on the frontier of something, which is amazing. I think it's a very exhilarating feeling. Aubrey, do you want to say something?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, as Laura said, I've already said a few words, but maybe there are people who joined the call late, so I'll repeat myself a little bit, and then I'll give a more general account. So, the work that we're doing at LEV Foundation is completely unique. It is the only research program in the world that is attempting to combine rejuvenation treatments in mammals, in mice in particular, in a manner to try to postpone the health problems of late life, but in animals that are already in middle age before we've done anything to them at all. This is something that currently absolutely can't be done. If you take animals that are in middle age, then at the moment, the best you can do is to postpone their health problems and their death by about 4 months. And that has been possible for decades, since the middle of last century. Essentially, all you need to do is feed them less than they would like. And unfortunately, that approach doesn't work nearly so well in longer-lived species like you and me. So what we want to do is transcend, break through that glass ceiling of 4 months, and ideally our stretch goal is to treble that, to get an additional 12 months of life, again starting when the animals are already in middle age. So in actual numbers, that means mice that would normally live on average about 2.5 years, starting when they are 1.5 years old, so they have 1 year left to live, and doubling that 1 year out, so they live an average of 3.5 years total. And we believe we can do this, but it's going to take time, because the approach that we're taking, which of course is the approach that I have been pursuing for the past 25 years or so, is damage repair. It involves a divide and conquer strategy of identifying ways to eliminate various types of molecular and cellular damage that the body does to itself throughout life, as consequences of its normal metabolism, and combining those things so as to repair a sufficiently comprehensive subset of that damage so that the animals just don't get sick nearly so soon. We are very sure that that approach is the only approach that will ever work for long-lived species to any significant extent, and therefore the first step is to make it work in relatively short-lived species like mice. My current estimate is that once we do get it working in mice, it'll take perhaps only about a decade to get it properly working in humans. largely because of the clamour from the wider world that will ensue when we are able to do things in mice that massively exceed what we can do today and have been able to do for the past few decades. The various approaches that we're taking critically do not just involve drugs. They involve cell therapies and gene therapies and immune therapies. And these things are inherently quite challenging both to develop and to administer. So the experiments that we need to do are pretty big and pretty expensive. The one that we started with early last year cost a total of $3.5 million. It's nearly done now. We have reached roughly that 4-month life extension that was possible already, but we have not been able to exceed it very much yet. However, we've learned a great deal from this, and of course, we're always incorporating new information from studies published by the rest of the longevity community. So we think that we have a very good chance in our next study of beating that 4 months by quite a lot. But that, of course, depends on actually doing that next study. And that's why we are coming to Catalyst to help us raise the funds with which to get it going.
Cool. Well, you heard it here first, folks. We are, well, Aubrey and Vita Dow are raising money on Catalyst to do really critical longevity research. I'm really interested, just as a quick side note, on your choices choosing mouse as your animal model. So for those watching that maybe don't know this, but obviously the animal model that you choose to test on is pretty relevant because you have to make sure that those results are sort of, can carry up the line all the way to humans. So yeah, I'd love to know why you feel like mice is the right choice.
Yes, so this is a very important question. And first of all, you're absolutely right that there are arguments for and against different species. And a lot of the medical research that's done these days, not only in aging, involves starting with mice and then moving on to intermediate species, whether it's like dogs or maybe non-human primates and so on. And that may very well be relevant for us as well. However, at this point in the research process where we are trying to find out what works and what doesn't work, what interventions might even cancel each other out, the critical thing is, first of all, to be able to get results quickly. So it's good to be working with a relatively short-lived species that only has a year to live when we start the experiment in the absence of any interventions. And secondly, this is critically important, is to use a species that has been used by a very large number of other research groups in the past. Because the fact is, with biomedical research, you're working with trying to manipulate a system that you really don't understand. This is really, and Peter will agree with me on this because of his background in physics, it's a very different world than, working with non-living entities that we actually built ourselves or whatever. And so, yeah, I mean, leveraging the information that other people have managed to acquire over many decades is absolutely critical. If you start with a new species, then you basically learn exactly nothing for at least a decade. And that's why there are very few species that have been introduced into biomedical research, whether in longevity or elsewhere, over the past half century. There's probably only like 3 that have become major organisms, like the zebrafish and nematode worm. Yeah, I mean, so that's the main reason why we're using mice.
Thank you so much. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, I want to just make sure everyone gets the chance to speak. And Brian, you haven't had your moment. I would love to hear about Brian. So Brian was part of the BioDAO startup Launchpad Bio. He, basically has been working with his Cerebrum DAO, which does brain health. And Mark, who spoke at the beginning of the call, they have recently fundraised on Catalyst. And yeah, I was sitting in the office watching that funding bar fill up in real time and like refreshing the page. And it was just, it was such an insane moment. And so, yeah, I want to know how it felt for you, Brian.
Well, I caught a lot of grief. It went faster than anybody expected. And a lot of people wanted to get in that couldn't. So I'm optimistic for where the token goes when it lists. This is absolutely fantastic. This Catalyst platform movement has been amazing. It's humbling to see great science get funded, but Peter, your point about the intersection of geeks here, it's about time that the science geeks get their chance instead of the software geeks. Enough money is showered there, so it's time to shower it on science and life sciences as well. But beyond that, Jesse, you'll appreciate this too. So the Percepted IPT is quite unique, and we're going to have that trading as soon as a couple of logistical issues are worked out, because the contracts have been signed and executed, and the funding for the studies already underway. Materials being ordered. This is the first, that I believe, tokenization of a patent portfolio. We have 12 global patents on composition of matter and methods of use for what's in Percepta. The product's been in the market for over a decade. It's got a tremendous safety profile. It's got strong lab results and mouse models, as well as in vitro human cell data. And we're super optimistic that this cat's claw and these polyphenols that are in there, like the oolong tea extract, are going to not only be tremendous for brain health, but for longevity as well. And so what this study is actually, the money coming into this is really interesting, because traditionally this type of work would not get funded. And what we want to do is we want human data on this, and we want to move this even to a potential FDA botanical drug approval status, which would expand its access tremendously. We're at such a tremendous point with Alzheimer's and neurodegeneration. I mean, we've kind of lost our minds on how we look at this disease and condition. It's ironic, right? But it's one of the few conditions that we literally don't look at as from an aging perspective. We have early interventions on cancers. We have early interventions on heart disease with cholesterol and statins. And yet Alzheimer's and neurodegeneration, we wait for the symptoms to occur, and it's nearly irreversible at that point. I think there's a tremendous, the timing on this study and in this space, with where the US is going with biomarkers and early detection, to have proactive, preventative, prophylactic type treatments that are validated in humans, could be game changing for literally preventing Alzheimer's disease. So we've tokenized the patent portfolio. It's 12 patents, 22 are in prosecution. It's got a tremendous safety profile. You can look across the US and Europe on cat's claw. It's actually quite awesome. And we're just fast forwarding into human data, and we really think that this could be a potential watershed moment for for brain longevity, if you will. And if we don't have our marbles with us as we live longer, what do we have, right?
Yeah, and for DeSci as well, like what you're doing, it's fulfilling what is the original pitch of Molecule, which was this question that Paul and Tyler would ask everybody, which is, what if diabetics collectively owned insulin, collectively governed the underlying drug that they're taking? And to have this group of IP token holders who are collectively governing Percepta would be the first time that vision has been truly realized in the open market. And it would be kind of the first time you have a drug or a supplement or a product like that that's in the open market with this tokenized community attached to it, which is super, super cool. And cat's claw itself it's derived from this indigenous plant, right? It's widely used among indigenous peoples of the upper Amazon. So what I'd love to see, and I don't know if you could speak to this a little bit, is some kind of built-in reciprocity where a portion of IP tokens or a portion of revenues or something goes to support these people who are kind of the custodians of this plant for so many millennia, who are often forgotten in the race to commercialize.
Oh, it's 100%, Jesse. That's I think where the power of the community can come in. I mean, thankfully, and we checked this before proceeding on this. It's a, you know, the bark from these vines actually is replaced quite quickly. So Albert will be happy that it's relatively sustainable, and we're not raiding the Amazon rainforest. That would have been a non-starter for us. But if this truly does come out of there, then absolutely. We would be paying it back there. And you know, Dr. Snow, who wanted to be on this call, it's just short notice. We'll bring him on. He's, you know, he's quirky, and he's just been pursuing this whole space of polyphenols and brain health for 25 plus years. He's probably one of the top experts in this area, and he puts out his content on YouTube. He's got 500,000 followers on YouTube. He's entertaining. But he's a serious scientist, and his excitement about pushing this forward with us, and I think I can speak for him on this, is he's always wanted to see this go to FDA level drug approval status, and has just never been able to find the funding to take it in that direction, even with the patent protections. So DeSci is enabling that, and it's going to be a wonderful experiment to see play out.
Nice. Jesse, I'm going to put you in the hot seat. So Jesse is obviously with SciDAO, but he also is Molecule's chief legal architect. So I'm going to get him to explain. So basically, for those of you who maybe have missed the beginning, when you fund a project on Catalyst, that funding happens on a token bonding curve. You can put money in until that goal is reached. You can also withdraw your contributions during that funding process if you so desire. And then once that funding goal is reached, sort of everything closes and the project enters a negotiation period. And then once the negotiation period is complete and everything goes to plan and all of the necessary legal documentation is sorted, then money goes to researcher, work gets done, and what gets handed to funders are intellectual property tokens. So Jesse, please can you tell people why the hell they'd want an intellectual property token and what they enable?
Sure, yeah, happy to. I do feel my seat heating up here. Actually, that's just my space here. It's really cold.
I thought if I have you in the room, I'll hand it over.
No, I hear you. So the IP token model was born out of VitaDAO, right? When in VitaDAO, the community asked us in the legal working group to please build a way for these IP NFTs to be community governed in a way that isn't just through Vita tokens, but is actually governed specifically for this research project. And so we developed this system with my colleague Chris Burns for taking the IP NFT and minting fungible IP tokens that don't represent ownership of the underlying IP, because that ownership is still vested in the owner of the NFT, right? Because IP co-ownership creates big problems, but that's governance of the underlying IP in the holders of the fungible tokens, which is a very important distinction. For example, in the case of Percepta, you have the owner of the patent, right, who has this whole portfolio of patents and doesn't necessarily want to share ownership because that would cause all these problems that come with IP co-ownership, but does want to have this community that has a say, that is empowered to contribute, and that is potentially empowered to access the underlying drug at a discount, or whatever you want to do with it. And so very importantly, the IP tokens do not represent an ownership right or an equity right in the underlying IP. They only represent a governance right in the underlying IP. You can think of them like membership in an IP pool, and in that IP pool is this IP that is, has this semi-public access, but not ownership. Does that answer your question, Ella? Specifically about what IPTs are, what makes it unique?
Yes.
If you're interested in kind of learning more, there's an article that Chris and I wrote called IPTs are a gain of function for IP NFTs on the Molecule blog. And I will dig up that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's on our blog site. I can share a link. Cool. So, I mean, we've got 5 minutes left here. I wanted to open the floor to all of our viewers. If you have any questions for any of these esteemed guests we have tonight, please pop them in the chat and we'll make sure they get answered. But yeah, I wanted to also maybe open it up to our actual guests. Do you guys have any sort of questions or comments for each other now that you're in a room together?
I have one question to Aubrey. So Aubrey, I assume you're you're familiar with crypto. You might no, yeah. I've seen you in this space. I've seen you on some videos from a couple of years ago. But anyways, I just want to hear from your perspective of this funding model. You know, because like traditionally you do receive a grant, right? And that's sort of it. And in this case, you're sort of IPOing your research in a way, like you're going public from day zero, right? Not purely like strictly speaking, but it has certain similar perhaps dynamics and characteristics of it. I'm just keen to hear from your perspective, like how, you know, what's your take on that? How do you relate to that idea and so on?
Yeah. So thank you for asking this, because you're absolutely right. It's very important. So right from the beginning of my career in aging, I chose to work outside of the traditional system, largely for the reasons that you have described. That if one works within academia, then one is beholden to essentially popularity, because everything is, all funding decisions are made by peer review among one's colleagues who are themselves desperate for grant funding. And essentially one has to aim for fashionable things that are perceived to be able to get positive results really quickly. And that excludes a large amount of things that are really vital. So that's why I chose to work to create organizations that are funded entirely by philanthropy. Now, in the crypto community, we have the additional advantage that the demographic is young, and it's got a lot of people who, first of all, are geeks and think like engineers, like me, and also, secondly, who are who aim high, who have not been ground down by failure over their career. So I have found a very fertile source of support within the crypto community. The most conspicuous one person was definitely Vitalik Buterin, who started funding my previous organization pretty much as soon as he was in a position to write any kind of big checks. So so it's been a very important community for me. I've spoken at a lot of crypto conferences at which I am always the only non-crypto speaker, just there because of the fan base, really. But yes, to come to your point about being public from day zero, that's absolutely vital. The real huge advantage of not having to worry about publication priority and stuff like that is that I can put out interim results all the time. And for the first experiment that I've been doing over the past, as I say, nearly 2 years, that's what I've been doing. Every month or two, I put something on Twitter and Facebook, giving the updates on the survival curves and talking about interpretations and next steps and so on. And I'm absolutely finding that that's an extraordinarily valuable and effective way to not only maintain community enthusiasm, but also to grow the community and get people to understand the value of this work. So that is definitely the intention going forward as well.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, guys, I'm going to be super mindful of everyone's time. So I think we're going to wrap it up here. I wanted to say a massive, massive thank you to all of you who joined and spoke. I feel very lucky to be able to host this conversation and chat to you guys. And I'm really excited for what comes next. And then again, my little promo here, for those of you who have just joined, there have been a bunch of projects funded on Catalyst. Next week, we have 2 more coming, and that is Aubrey's project with VitaDAO, and then there's DeSci's project called Next Gen and Pathogens. And so if you are interested in getting involved in those projects, supporting these researchers, supporting this work, putting your crypto to good, and not just meme coins, then please stay in touch. Follow our channels. We send out the announcements about the projects going live on our official Twitter and the Catalyst Telegram. Join those both for live updates. And then for the people who have put money into Catalyst and have funded the research that is already funded, everyone is working super duper hard to get these tokens to you and to get these projects going. I'm sure you will hear a lot more from the researchers that you have decided to put your faith in. They're excited to talk to you. They're excited to work on their research with you. So this is just really the beginning of a really beautiful process, and one that I am hoping can really shift the way science is done, hopefully, in a big, beautiful world. And so thank you, everyone. Have a beautiful evening, day, weekend, wherever you are. And yeah, stay safe. Cool. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.